Taritha knocked on the door of the mage's chambers. She was eager to start the day's lessons. The tutoring sessions had resumed some time ago. Once the factory was running in a more predictable routine, the lessons she'd once dreaded, she now relished. As her grasp of the underlying concepts grew, her knowledge was more akin to planks and flotsam than a useful ship. But it was something. She could often do gestures of frost and heat on her first try, and that felt a lot like knowing magic. Last week, she even did her first more complicated spell and was tired for days after. But it worked. She wasn't just a cursed witch. Her studying was forging her into an educated mage. "Oh, come in." "Yes, I'm just at the workbench," Grigory called out. "Morning, sir. How's it going?" "Oh, morning, Ethelina." "An honor as ever." Taritha didn't know how to act around non-humans. The elf was regal, dignified, and powerful, so respect seemed like a bare minimum. But the church said humans were the best and non-humans deserved contempt. While she knew enough to ignore that exact teaching, she wasn't able to fully get her mind around the disgust she felt toward inhumanity. It was wrong, but a lifetime of biases were hard to shake. While their interactions were rare, the herbalist had settled on treating the elf like human nobility. At least she had a framework for that, and so far, it had worked. Perhaps her voice will sway him from his folly. "Taritha, tell him it's beneath him to feud with these lesser mages. A single day of his time is worth 1,000 years of theirs." "Wait, what? I'm out of the loop. Do you mean those grumpy ones that came in with Geon?" Taritha finally got a good look at Grigory. He was at his workbench, surrounded by half-finished projects and at least a dozen scampering imps, busy following his latest commands. The mage smiled, and his hair was a bit tousled. He must have been at this for some time. "Yes, especially that know-nothing prude, Rogohi. He insulted me in front of the whole town yesterday. I just know he's going to go to Jagged Cove and blacken my name and bring the college down on my head. It's a disaster. It might be opening more slowly than a spring rose, but it's clear enough what path we tread. Fear not, gentle Taritha. I've a plan. It'll all be fine." Taritha could see large stuffed squirrels on the cluttered workbench. Far bigger than actual squirrels, but about right for a child's toy. They were of impeccable quality, like all imp-made goods, which made the inaccuracies all the more glaring. "That's good. I hope your plan doesn't involve these toys. Real squirrels are much smaller, and they don't have antennae, nor backpacks for that matter." Taritha would never normally talk back to her employer, but he'd assured her in the past that he valued her expertise. Given her daily encounters with countless tree rats, she felt qualified. "Ah, you are only familiar with Hyruxian common squirrels. These are super space squirrels. Much different. They are bigger and faster and often say, 'merp.'" Grigory quietly directed his infernal workforce, adding details and fine-tuning. "Oh, I love it. Yeah, I'm on your side for this one, sir. Stick it to those snooty mainlanders. What you gonna have the space rats do?" Ethelina chimed in with icy indifference. "Don't encourage these impulses. He's toying with his lessers. If he wants them dead, I'm sure Stanisk will bring him their heads by lunchtime. Or I'll have one of his men-at-arms do it. Or you can poison them. Grigory, refocus on your real plans." The elf sat on the high-backed chair, more elegant than any human could have managed. Her arcane employer nodded. "He's still out on that ore delivery, but I get that point of view. And I agree. I thought up the plan when I was very angry, and that version of the plan was unacceptably risky. It would have hurt my ambitions more than they would have accelerated them. But I've made a new and better plan. For new And better reasons. Taratha poked around the workbench. There were a lot of different things scattered about, and it was tough to say what was related to what. She wouldn't be able to discern his plan from the evidence in front of her. "What's the new plan, then?" "I assume the imps are going to wear the costumes. But why?" Grigory took the mostly completed head of the fake squirrel from his imps and examined it critically before popping black marbles into the eye sockets, making the costume look far less like a toy. "Initially, I was going to have them steal all their clothes and make them beg for new clothes from the townsfolk, naked. Ha! Could you imagine? It would have been glorious, and no one could think of questioning who's the better mage then. But that doesn't align with my vision of myself, the leader I feel I should be. That plan was petty and cruel, so obviously I discarded the very notion. I'm more dignified than that." Taratha picked up a scrap of brown fabric. It looked like an incomplete enchantment, but she couldn't tell its nature, so she put it back where she found it. "Oh, now what'll you do?" Grigory stopped his preparations. "I'm glad you asked. An imp will wear the suit, break into their room in the middle of the night, and steal their clothes. But, get this, then bring them back new clothes later in the same night." By the time he was done, he was gesturing with both hands. Taratha raised her eyebrows to the elf. Damn, maybe Ethelina was right. "Oh, that's much more mature than your first plan, sir." "Right. Someone gets it," he expounded. "Just to make sure we're on the same page." The young woman narrowed her eyes. "Why, though?" This isn't about revenge or honor or drivel like that. It's a rational defense of my goals and values. I identified his biggest vulnerability, and I plan to drive a spear right through it. You see, I've been buying up some books on tactics and strategy for Stanisk. Don't tell him, but I've been reading them before passing them along. I've read that the most important part of warfare is knowing your enemy. Grigory was pacing in the open center of his chambers, alive with energy. He clearly wasn't going to be talked out of this venture. "I don't often see this side of you. Is everything okay?" Taratha's trained eye looked for irregularities in his face or eyes or hands, for any sign of illness or poisoning. Mages were famously only a short walk from madness, and it would be frustrating if he'd gone nuts. "I just got a taste for fancy imported fruits too." "Gah! It's that they're right. I have been the worst imaginable mage. I knew this day would come. What was I ever thinking? I can't just make it up as I go. That's not how it's ever been done. The whole basis of my plan, of everything, was a terrible idea, and I just surrounded myself with people that agreed with me. And now I've gone too far. I can't admit my crimes. There are too many, and they're too big. You know that the giant demon, whose rampage drove them out of Jagged Cove and started this conflict with the church." He stood still and took off his glasses. His eyes closed, and arms hung limply. "It was me. I did it. Under duress. But it was me." He frowned deeply and looked at her expectantly after he bared his most shameful secret. "Oh, the most powerful demonologist in history fleeing the capital the same week as the biggest demon attack in history. Who among us could have seen a thread between them?" With effort, Taratha kept her expression neutral. "Thank you for trusting me with this. Your past. It doesn't change a thing, though. You're still you, and we still like you, my lord. We still think you are doing something great. Well, I do, at least. I'd not dare speak for Ethelina." They both looked over to the other side of the office and saw Ethelina commanding other imps to make what appeared to be a sprawling dollhouse. It seemed unlikely she couldn't hear them halfway across the room, but the ancient elf gave no indication. "No offense, Taritha, but these are my peers, telling me a truth I've known all along. Lashing out at them for reminding me of my failings is itself a moral failure. Don't think I haven't thought of that. It's just, I've been making big plans, important choices, all on my own for a long time. Maybe too long. I can't think of a morally defensible reason why my opinion should matter more than anyone else's, let alone the sum total of the moral authority of the church, the college, and the House of Lords." His manic energy was spent, and he slumped down on his sofa, utterly defeated. The young herbalist felt she saw a narrow, winding path to walk him back. She hadn't read those books on philosophy he'd given her, but just hearing him talk for these last few months, she hoped she had the right words. "Sir, the fact that you care about the ethics behind your authority is exactly what makes you more qualified," she trailed off, glancing down as she searched for the right words. "Powerful lords just expect the world to serve them, and usually it does. You're challenging that, and that's never been done before. It's better. I think the reasoning stands on its own from first principles," he absently corrected. "Ah, but I could be lying to you. They tell the people the emperor serves the empire, even though that's clearly the reverse. But I'm not lying. And I want there to be a new era, one without lords and serfs, just minds exploring the world. Thank you. I'm glad I have you around." He put his glasses back on and said a bit more loudly, "Both of you." Ithlina didn't look up from her notebook as her imps were assembling a tiny fence around the tiny cluster of buildings. "You are wasting valuable time on this distraction." He sighed, staring blankly into the distance. Taritha saw the familiar signs of him on the verge of slipping into one of his self-reflective torpors, which rarely boded well for his spirits or productivity. Determined to shake him out of it, she mustered her enthusiasm. "So what's their biggest weakness, my lord?" "I bet it's their dumb faces." "More what's in front of their dumb faces." Taritha smiled to herself. He had a nearly pathological need to answer her direct questions. Settling in attentively, she listened as he began explaining his plot, his voice calm and clinical. "And really, it's only Ragohi's dumb face. He's set in his ways to a degree I'd forgotten could exist. It's almost an unpleasant memory of my own time there. The college is thick with greybeards who won't be convinced water is wet if some ancient tablet says it isn't. However much I explain, however detailed or patient I am, it'll never change their minds. In lesser organizations, you'd simply wait a generation or two for the old guard to die out. By then, the revolutionary ideas become dull orthodoxy. But in the college, with their near immortality, a generation or two is most of a millennium. I hate to ask, but does your plan involve speeding up when a lot of very powerful men die?" Taritha looked at the squirrel suits again. The imps were sworn to pacifism, but had he found a loophole? Oh my, no. He'll be telling those very greybeards, the dusty archmages who are older than most of the towns in the empire, that I did something impossible. That's a strain on his credibility. No one can conjure clothes. No one can mend broken spines. He must convince them that someone they've never heard of had done both of those things before they can censure me. That can potentially mean arrest and execution, which in this case means open-armed conflict since... He gestured to the thick walls around them. Taritha understood little of imperial law, but arresting someone with soldiers and a castle was bound to be more complicated. I see. In fact, if he only had to convince them of one impossible thing, it would be vastly easier and would be more dangerous to me. But now he also has to convince them that a conjurer has mastered biomancy. Yet another impossibility. It's geometric. The more claims, the harder it is to link them all to a single mage, and the less believable each one becomes. What if he had to make a third or fourth impossible claim? What if he was alone, with no one backing his accusations? Surely they would assume he's the crank. You wouldn't launch a fleet and an armed detachment based on such madness, especially if you've never once thought for one instant in the last 2 centuries that anything new was possible. Fifth Circle alchemist arcanist Rogohi dropped his spoon into the stew, where it made a half-hearted splat in the orange mush. Cod and carrot were just so common. It needed more seasoning, and a better cook, and entirely different ingredients. It was better than starving, but by such a narrow margin he honestly didn't know if it was worth it. Am I being fair? I showed up on the shores of these dirt people, and it's only reasonable that I eat like a dirt person. Did that cowardly sea captain trick me? This is the very place he promised, close and a hub of ships. It's my trusting nature that I didn't ask what kind of ships or where they went. Having survived a few days on one cargo ship, he was far from eager to spend weeks on another, especially in the much rougher seas of a crossing to the north side of the Nerean. If Wavegate and Jagged Cove were messes, it seems likely more cities will be in turmoil. Maybe Anful, over a week's sail west, but at least it was a proper city in a proper duchy. Hopefully one of my colleagues will reply to my letters soon. The idea of spending a whole winter here was nauseating. He'd sent a dozen letters out over the last week, to anyone he could think of that could host or sponsor him. The nature of letters meant that even in the best case, he'd not be leaving in the few weeks before the storm season began. It doesn't help that I'm nearly out of money, and haven't gotten my stipend in months. Doubtlessly the mail ship carrying the last one was turned around by the Inquisitors. Maybe bribing those zealots and staying put would have been better. At least a damned sight more comfortable. Rogohi glanced around the table, staring at his glum students eating silently in the busy inn. Since the fracas at the Pine Peak, they'd been staying at the Tremblingly Aspen Arms, a smaller inn with worse food, but at least they had room for them. This tiny village was bustling and booming like no town he'd seen, so it was no surprise that it had attracted the unsavory. Any of you are welcome to eat the rest of my cod slop. I'm retiring to the room early tonight. Please be quiet when you come up. My sleep is all that keeps me sane. I, Arcanist, sleep well. Rogohi hated sharing a room with these children. None of them was old enough even to be his great-grandchild if he'd had any. It didn't help that most hadn't become full mages yet, and were poor as mice. It was yet another undignified compromise forced on him by his dwindling means and the town's limited options. The inn was affordable, but with the town booming, only one room was available, and the other guests had refused his paltry offers to bribe them out. The innkeeper had been infuriatingly indifferent to his plight. They're a surly and hard folk, but I guess if I had to live in a drafty hovel and eat cod my entire life, I'd resent my betters too. The old stairs up to their room creaked almost as much as his knees and back, but he was too dignified to complain. He unlocked the door and stepped into the dim, quiet space. The aged arcanist went through the nightly motions, setting his belongings aside, changing into his nightgown, and carefully locking the window. As he moved to fluff the pillow, he was yet again baffled by the inn's peculiar charm. Despite its run-down exterior, the place had lordly beds, wide, soft, and surprisingly comfortable. Even the headboard boasted a detailed relief of horses racing through a river. The innkeeper claimed it was sold to him by the town's mage. Clearly that wasn't possible. It was normal, mundane wood. The finish, the carving, the bedding, all perfectly mundane, not the faintest hint of mana or enchantment. Doubtlessly another layer of his schemes to defraud the witless, but thankfully it still worked for sleeping, and his weary bones were grateful for its comfort. Blowing out the thin candle, he climbed in, settling into the soft warmth. Carousing from the common room below drifted up, and thin lines of light streamed through the uneven floorboards. With an irritable grunt, he rolled over, shutting out the noise, and let sleep take him. His slumber didn't last long. A strange noise woke him up with a start. There was something on the foot of his bed, some enormous shadowy rodent, nearly as big as a house cat. Lit only by the pale moonlight from the window, the beast stood on his hind legs, its glassy eyes glimmering in the dark. It stood perfectly still, while the arcanist struggled to control his panic. Normal mice were no concern to him, but this was something else. Its wide bushy tail moved slightly, and Rogohi yelped, attracting the attention of the creature. He looked around the room and saw he was still alone, his students clearly still drinking and carousing below. Rogohi's pulse hammered deafeningly, but he was no coward, nor did his pacifism mean he was helpless. With his hand hidden under the soft blanket, he made a gesture of dreamless sleep. The mighty squirrel was entirely unaffected, and only now did he see it had long antennas, and wireframe glasses, and a backpack. This is no simple beast. This is something else. He scrambled out of bed, trying to get as far from his strange visitor as he could get in the dark room. What do you want?" he demanded. The superspace squirrel ignored him and hopped down. Before he could react, it grabbed his blue and gold arcanist robe off the floor, folded it neatly, and shoved it in its pack, and then shoved his chain of attainment in too. Pausing for the barest instant, it leapt out the open window. I'm sure I closed it. Am I losing my mind? He lit his candle with another of the gestures he'd mastered, and ran down the stairs, barefoot in just his nightgown. He knew nearly a dozen magical gestures, a feat that marked his excellence among even senior mages. He shouted across the busy alehouse, "Enough of your merrymaking! I've been attacked. A space squirrel has robbed us. Help me catch it." Silence. "It's just a bad dream, Arcanist. Now go back to sleep." One of the insolent brats dared to shout back, his tongue slow and heavy from the watery rural beers. "I didn't ask. I commanded. Now!" Without waiting for a response, he ran outside, leaving them behind. He darted around the corner and saw a bushy tail through the undergrowth. "Pah! You shan't escape my wrath. Stop, vermin!" "Nope," his nocturnal burglar replied. The arcanist tried to send the interloper into a dreamless sleep, again to no effect. He chased it further, but could at least hear the voices of his youthful students calling after him. He cast a gesture of mana visualization as he barreled off the narrow street and into the sparse woods, his long strides allowing him to close in on the otherworldly intruder. Surely this is an illusion cast by that contemptible conman. How is there no magic at all? Surely that's not right. Could this actually be a space squirrel? That's impossible. There's no such thing. But this is no illusion. "Over here, lads! I'm gaining on it." The beast stopped and faced him, its long, bouncy antennae silently taunting him. "I have you now! Surrender my clothes!" "Nerp! I don't speak your accursed moon language. You can't hope to win. I'm powerful beyond your ken." The giant rodent turned, darting toward what looked like a dead-end corner. Seizing his chance, Rogohi lunged forward. Certain he had it trapped. The creature dodged with inhuman speed, and he tumbled past it. As he scrambled to his feet, a deafening boom shook the ground, throwing him flat on his belly on the loamy forest floor. He flinched, turning to see a massive purple mushroom cloud bloom just ahead, followed almost immediately by another boom and a blindingly bright, pure white column of flame. "Light, save us all!" the old man gasped. He scampered backwards, away from the explosions, until his back came against a tree trunk. He looked up to see the mighty rodent standing proudly on a tiny rowboat, drifting above the bushes and deeper into the dark forest. The creature stood upright, one paw raised forward like a tiny, furry admiral leading a fleet, its bushy tail high and regal. Rogohi thought he could hear something else, perhaps a faint, rapid patter, almost like hoofbeats. The strange beast on his wash-basin-sized vessel was only barely out of sight when his pupils came upon him. "Sir! There you are! We thought we lost you. Why are you down in the mud? Are you all right?" I don't know." His bones hurt, his ears rang, and everything felt deeply unreal. "You saw it, right? The, beast?" By now the rest of his students had arrived, panting from the unexpected run, including Bedril the biomancer. "You're going to be fine, just a few scrapes." The sturdy youth helped him to his feet. "Good. No one asked you. What was that?" He hobbled over to where the thing disappeared into the night. "None of us saw anything. What did you see? What were you chasing?" It was the space squirrel, the size of a house cat, but with antennae. It spoke to me in its language. It folded my robe before it stole it, in its little leather backpack. The arcanist frantically explained. "Let's get you back to bed, sir. It sounds like you just had a bad dream. It's okay," Bedril said gently. "Damn your eyes! I know what I saw. Surely you saw the great fires it cast to escape, most unnaturally coloured, doubtlessly powerful pyromancy." Gromly, the pyromancer stepped forward. "Say no more, arcanist. I'll sweep the area." He pushed through the bushes towards where his mentor pointed. It's a bit warmer, and it kind of smells of lamp oil, but we're not far from the inn, and there are cottages all over the place." "No, sir, no signs of pyromancy. No eddies of mana, nothing enchanted, and no energies have been recently drawn here." The pyromancer dismissed his gestures and returned to his mentor. "Come on, sir. You're shivering. It's a cold night, and you're just in your gown. I'm sure you'll be fine in the morning. Don't treat me like a doddering fool. I'm a senior member of the college. Show some respect." His gravitas was undercut by his chattering teeth. "Fine. We'll investigate it in the morning. I'm sure it's that damned conman. It must be, right?" They ushered him back the short walk to their inn, ignored the bemused stares of remaining patrons, and ascended the creaking stairs to their small room. "See, I put my robe right on top of the chest and now it's gone. And my chain of attainment. Both stolen from me. Ha! I told you." He snorted in vindication. "We don't doubt you, arcanist. We'll solve the crime in the morning. And you can wear my breeches and work shirt until we recover your robes." Pfft! And be mistaken for a farmer. First, it's the cod. Then this. We should have stayed in Wave Gate. He harumphed and laid in the only bed. His pupils laid down some blankets on the floor and did what they could to get comfortable, same as every other night. After their midnight ruckus, the common room below had finally gone silent. Well, isn't this just a fine time? Have I fallen into the kingdom of the fairies, where dreams are real and the impossible abounds? Damn those boys! Too familiar by far. No light damned respect. I'll tear this town apart stone by damned stone to get back my damned robes. And chain. It's that damned Thipperly. I just know it. The bed was warm and soft, and his day had been long, especially with all the spells he'd cast in the chase. He was bone-weary and drifted off to a fitful sleep, even as he ruminated on the savagery of his suffering. "Sir, wake up! Look!" one of them exclaimed. With effort, he cracked his reluctant old eyes open a slit. Gah! The morning light was a steady grey. "Good news. Your robes weren't stolen. They're right where you left them, folded and laundered. Oh, your chain's here too. I told you it would be okay. Come morning."